Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank Hanson for reading the opening scripture this morning, Philippians 4-6, and I'd like to read it again, just to get us started this morning. I'm going to use the lapel knife.
It just came on.
All right. It says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, and with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Those are beautiful words, aren't they?
Amen.
They present a beautiful description of how to turn our anxieties that we have into prayer and to present these anxieties to God. It explains how God takes our anxieties, turns them around, and understands them, and guards our heart. And in return, He gives us peace. It's simple and so powerful. You know, we've heard these words before. The words are just words. If we don't really believe what we read in the Bible, if we don't experience them, and if we don't experience the ability that God has to practice these words, then they are just words. We read in the Bible, don't be anxious, but instead present your anxieties to God in prayer, and He will guard your hearts. They're beautiful. But without the belief, these are just words. Words by themselves have little or no impact. They sound nice, but if you don't experience their power, if we don't believe in what they mean, they're just nothing but noise. You know, we're surrounded by noise all the time, aren't we? People that claim to have the answer, but if they do not dwell on what is good, if they do not dwell on what is pure, if they do not dwell on what is right, then they don't have the answer. They're not worthy of praise if they don't dwell on what's good. They're just nothing but noise. You know, we recently finished a brutal presidential election. Maybe you heard about it? It was kind of brutal. And over the 18-month campaign, we heard a lot of noise, didn't we? We heard a lot of empty promises. We heard a lot of people saying, candidates and their surrogates, trying to excite us, give us anxiety. And I'm truly convinced that by making the voter anxious, it stirs up their passion. And when they're anxious, they get fired up, they get passionate. And the goal is to support the candidate that makes them anxious. They either scare them or they get them excited. But words should not make us anxious. There is already a lot of anxiety and passion in our world today. In Philippians 4, Paul says, be anxious for nothing, but instead turn it over to God, and He will give you peace. Sounds too simple to be true, doesn't it? To be anxious about nothing. Do we have that much faith that we're really willing to turn our anxiety over to God and not try to fix them ourselves? We do live in an anxious world, don't we? An anxious time. There's so much sadness, too much sadness. But you know, we're not the only people that have lived in anxious times. You think we are not any more unique than other generations that have lived in very anxious times? I couldn't imagine fighting a world war and being in a war, or being in a time when the whole world was at war. I couldn't imagine living in a concentration camp. I couldn't imagine not being able to live in a time in the world where you couldn't find medicine to protect your family. So there have been many anxious times throughout the world. Many stressful events in our history. I couldn't imagine to be imprisoned or tortured simply because of my beliefs. Yet previous generations have had to do that. Our anxieties today are different than previous generations, but they are still real to us. Even though I haven't gone through the anxieties of previous generations, the anxieties that I deal with are still a personal storm inside me. We have to deal with personal storms. Each one of us has personal storms, personal tumult in our lives. Maybe you're lucky and you don't, or maybe you've got the solution and you don't have a personal storm in your life sometimes. But anyway, these storms can separate us from God. They take away our joy. They separate us from our loved ones. If we aren't willing and able to deal with our anxieties, we become bitter and angry. We must learn how to deal with our anxieties. We must learn how to deal with the disappointments in life, to be able to handle things as they come along. Unfortunately, too many people don't know how to handle their personal turmoils. They try to fix them themselves instead, without God's help. And we've seen it. We've seen people that try to deal with their own personal turmoils without getting God involved. They turn to things such as alcohol or drugs. They turn to other solutions besides anything but God. These solutions usually are not very successful. By doing that, we're denying God the opportunity to help us. We're pushing Him away and saying, "Don't worry, God, I can do it myself. I can deal with this." Some people will do almost anything to avoid admitting that they need God in their life. We can try to beat these personal storms in our lives by ourselves, but it doesn't always work. Well, in Philippians, Paul has a suggestion. You see, Paul wrote the book of Philippians while he was in prison. He wrote this book to encourage the people of Philippi, believers whom he loved dearly. He also wrote this book to encourage future generations, such as ours. We can be encouraged on how to deal with our anxieties, what to do with them. You see, Paul wrote this book while he was in prison, not because of something he did that was bad. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't steal. He didn't cheat anybody. Paul ended up in prison simply because he shared the gospel of Jesus. And he was going through a lot of turmoil, even though you wouldn't know it. He was cold. He mentioned in 2 Timothy that he was cold. He needed a cloak because he was arrested and taken away so quickly he didn't have time to get his cloak. He also wanted his scriptures. These were the things that would comfort him, his scriptures and to be warm. Other than that, he had other anxieties, but he didn't let him get to them. One of the believers that was preaching with him ended up testifying against him. Other believers left, and Paul didn't let that get him down. In the book of Philippians, the dominant theme is joy. Can you imagine how Paul was able to deal with his anxieties and reflect a spirit of joy to those people he loved? And that is something that we are also encouraged to do. We are to be that example, to spread joy to others, even though sometimes the personal turmoil in our own lives is difficult to deal with. And the way we do that is to deal with our personal turmoil. And we can't do that alone. At some point we need to recognize that we cannot fight the personal storms in our lives all by ourselves. We need to take Paul's advice. We don't want to live a sad and anxious life, do we? The kind of life that steals the joy from us. We want to be like Paul. We want to be able to show what true joy is really like. We want to be able to set an example to others, to those we love, what true joy is really like, and what it's like to have God dwelling in our hearts. Each of us has to deal with the own issues that we have in our lives. Sometimes it seems like a storm steals our relationship with others. Paul tells us how to avoid it. He continues with this instruction in Philippians, and also he continues his instruction to us. In verse 8 of chapter 4, Paul says, "Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is anything excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, then dwell on these things. These things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." Do you have faith that that's true? Do you have faith that if we dwell on things that are good, God will be with us?
Yes.
Do you have faith like Paul, where focus on what's good, what's truly good, and reach out to Jesus, and He will give you peace? Finally, and have you ever had a personal storm that controlled your life? A personal anguish that just ate you up inside. It's terrible, isn't it? And maybe no one else has. Maybe I'm alone in this situation. Yeah, I've had personal turmoils that have just eaten me up. And during those times I thought, why, Jesus, why can't you come down and just tell me what to do? Why can't you just give me a dream and just tell me, Bruce, this is what you need to do? It doesn't work that way. He will speak to you, but I have to reach out to Him first. I have to reach out to Him and say, God, I'm turning my anguish, I'm turning my anxiety over to you. And I want you to show me what to do. When I want Jesus to come down and speak to me, that's when I realize my faith is really small. Because I'm the one that has to put my dilemma and give them to Him. The answer to my dilemma is simply to shift my burden to Jesus in prayer. Prayer should not be the last resort. Prayer should be your first choice. If we look at the Bible simply as words and have no faith in its power, then the message of the Bible is worthless. If we don't believe it, then we won't believe it. It has it's nothing but noise to us. But we do believe the Bible, don't we?
No!
The Bible is love. It is love for us. It offers peace in our storm. It offers peace and promises to put our anxiety to rest. By prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God will guard your heart. Most of you probably know what I'm talking about, because you've had your personal storms that you've dealt with, and realize that God does offer peace. But I want to tell you a story about once when I was a teenager. It was a long time ago. It's hard to believe, but I was a teenager at one time. My teenage years were pretty hard. I will not hesitate to tell you that teenage years can be really tough. And it's not that I grew up in a bad family. I didn't. I grew up in a great family. It's not that I had a lot of trouble in my neighborhood. I didn't have a lot of trouble. I grew up in a good neighborhood, but I still had personal turmoil. Even though my turmoil was different than the guy halfway around the world, I still had problems, and it ate me up inside. And that's the problem with turmoil in your life. It's big to you. It may not be big to the next person. But to you, when it affects you individually, it's big. And at this time, I was probably 16 or 17 years old, and the problems in my life had been building for months and months. I look back at it now and I say, well, it couldn't have been that big. But when I was 16, they were that big. They overwhelmed me. And I remember on this Sabbath afternoon, it was getting late in the afternoon. It was a day that I fully expected to be my last one, because I was done with my life. I just had enough. I was so empty inside. I did not desire to have one more day to live. Today they might call it hitting rock bottom. I didn't really know what I called it other than it was the end of my life. I was certain I did not want any more of it. The problems that I had, even though to some may not have seemed that big, but to me, They were monumental to this suicidal teenage boy. I was driving in my car that afternoon, kind of praying, kind of feeling sorry for myself, and just driving. It's what I did when I got depressed. When someone loses all hope, there's no telling what can happen. And I remember as I was driving that day, pleading with God to help me, and not getting the answer I wanted. I'd given up. I said, God, I'm done with you. I'm really done. I don't want any more of you. I don't want any more of life. You either take me now or I'll take myself later. Because I'm done. I can't deal with the turmoil in my life. And when I said that, I remember feeling kind of not a peace, but more of a satisfaction, I guess, in my life. I was still turmoiled, yes, but I had made that decision, and I was okay with it. It was a decision I had made. And I was somewhat oddly content with it. So, I was driving in a river valley, and I was coming up, going west on this Saturday evening. And as I crested the hill, I noticed something. At the crest of the hill, there was a large bank of clouds. You say, that's nothing. Of course, it's evening. The storm is coming. There's a large bank of clouds. So what? Well, what was odd about that bank of clouds was in the middle, right in front of me, as I was facing west, the sun was coming down, there was a large, huge clearing in front of me in those clouds. And I remember thinking, this is the oddest thing I've seen weather my whole life. This is the oddest thing I've ever seen. So I stopped my car to look. It was a huge clearing. It looked almost like a stage. It was flat, with a large arch. And I could see the blue sky behind it. And as I sat there in my car, this column, this figure, moved from the left to the middle of the stage. And I stopped and I kind of wiped my tears away and was watching it, looking at it, thinking, this is not a cloud. Some people might not view it that way, but I knew in my heart this was not a cloud. I watched as the sun came down and rested oh so briefly behind this column that was looking at me. It looked to me just like a divine figure standing there. And the beams of light came around it. And oddly enough, a strange peace came across me that I'd never felt before. It was a peace that just my problems were still there, but I felt completely different about it. I sat there and watched that sun go down. The column stayed there. I sat there. It was a remote road. There was nobody else around. I sat there for hours. As it got dark, and I realized that the skeptic might say that was just a cloud, but to that young boy that day, it's more than a cloud. It was an answer to my prayer. It was a time when I took my anxieties and I gave them to God, and He took them, and He gave me peace. We have all had personal storms. We've had anxious times. But it becomes sometimes so heavy we can't deal with them personally. There are conflicts, great and small. We can't avoid having them. The terrible things do not have to control us. Too often prayer becomes the last option. The thing we need to do is to make prayer the first option. Prayer should never be the last option. Prayer should always be the first option. We have a Savior that promises peace in our storm. Paul talks about it. Jesus talks about it. And many, many, many people have experienced that. It is real. I believe Paul, when he counseled the Philippians, and and said that prayer is your answer. Prayer brings you peace. The prayer I prayed that day so many years ago brought me peace. It was a prayer that turned that troubled young boy into a believer. Persistent prayer will transform you. It will give you a peace that nothing else can. Pray and present your anxieties to Jesus. And dwell on what is honorable. Dwell on what is right. Dwell on what is pure. And dwell on the God of peace. Please keep that in mind. Keep prayer in mind. Keep prayers first in your life, if you would.